Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Today I'm going to discuss Nick Fuentes' return to X and critical race theory. These topics tie together really nicely, intellectually, at least. There's nothing nice about either of these topics, perhaps, but they really do feed into each other. And keep in mind, I studied critical race theory in law school a few years ago. And it's probably fair to say that that education, not just the legal education, but the critical race theory education that I got in my final year of law school over the course of two separate courses, is the number one reason that I began to consider voting for a non-Democrat for the first time in my life, which is what this podcast is, the exploration of that urge. And the pandemic was a close second, but critical race theory probably takes the cake. So thank you for being here for this controversial episode. And please like, comment on, share, and subscribe to this show if you want to help me grow. Thanks a lot. So, as I said, I studied critical race theory, and I'm going to be talking about that topic based on stuff that I learned in law school. Now, where am I getting the information I'm about to talk about regarding Nick Fuentes? Well, Chase Geyser, who is now working with Alex Jones. Chase, he posted an interview the other day. He reposted it. I guess it's from back in December. And I just watched it where he had Nick Fuentes on the show. And it was incredible. Chase, you did an amazing job. Okay. And this Fuentes guy is formidable. There's just no doubt about it. He's extremely talented, intelligent, and charismatic. So maybe he's wrong at the end of the day about Jewish conspiracies, but you can't deny that he's impressive. So let's get into it. I want to know, what is this guy's core motivation, and it's obvious that it's religious. He is a strong Catholic, okay, you might say. He believes the Jews killed Jesus, and therefore that the Jews are evil. And he thinks that the Jews are responsible for the downfall of America. That's basically it in a nutshell. To expand on that a little bit, he thinks Jews are overrepresented in American institutions. And this is kind of how it ties into critical race theory. He says Jews are overrepresented in American institutions because, not because of merit, but because Jews have strong race loyalty. And at the same time, sorry, that's my phone. At the same time, he laments that in contemporary American society, white people are actively suppressed, forbidden from expressing any sort of racial solidarity or loyalty towards other white people. And he ends his interview, which was just phenomenal. I highly recommend you watch it, with Chase Geyser, by saying these children are being stolen from God by the devil through this culture. And I think it's our job as Christians to get in the way of that. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there. In terms of standing up for kids and being a strong force for good, wanting to be that, that's phenomenal. And this guy has courage and conviction. The question really is he right about the fact that, in his mind, the allegation that Jews are actively trying to destroy Western civilization to erase white culture? And this will tie into the conversation about critical race theory that I'm about to get into, but is there some sort of suppression of white culture in America? I think with diversity, equity, inclusion, and maybe some of the attempts to counterbalance what people on the left, particularly Black people, think is an unfair social balance over the years, maybe white people are feeling these days, oh man, I don't see white people on commercials anymore. This kind of thing. The Hollywood actors, oh, a white person can't dare play, a person of a Middle Eastern descent, or vice versa, or whatever. So just too sensitive. And are we losing freedom? And is freedom itself a white culture mindset, individual mindset? Are we losing that to a collectivism? These are all topics that I think are valid, but the question really is, are Jews driving that change, that push? The short answer for me is not that I can see. But if you want to say, oh, critical race theory is derivative of Marxism, which I'm sure it is, and it certainly is, and Marx is Jewish, well, there's a Jew, and he's trying to collectivize society and eradicate freedoms and erase white people from the map. The whole thing There are elements of it that I buy, but I don't yet see the grand connection to Jewish people. What I will say is, I agree that Jewish people do tend. I mean, I'm a Reformed Jew. I'm a light skinned Reformed Jew, and I've been the recipient of support, okay, in many different forms from my Jewish family. And all I can say is I appreciate it, and I hope everyone is so lucky to experience such a thing. Obviously, they're not, but I'm not ready to say that I see the global conspiracy to destroy Western civilization. I'm just not there. I don't. There's a disconnect there. Although I do think that there are, because of critical race theory, which I'm now going to break down. I think there are valid reasons why white people might sit around and go, "Are we being screwed with? Like, what's going on here?" And so, before I get into this definition of critical race theory, the essence of it is that this is not a fair playing field. Let me take a sip of water. That black people today still are dealing with the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. That's basically it, obviously, right? But it's a little more than that. So let me explain it to you. First, understand that criticalists, those who believe in critical race theory, assume that American institutions are not race, gender, or outsider neutral, and that it's dangerously naive to assume they are. Critical race theory is based on the assumption that outsiders and insiders have opposing views. Let's tie it back to Nick Fuentes. There is such a thing as white culture. And American mainstream culture is white, and that has an effect on people who are not white. So this basic idea when you step into this classroom in law school is, hey, get ready to be told that this society is, even though we passed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, this society is set up for straight white men. And that if you're not a straight white man, you have challenges that straight white men don't have. This is obviously the concept of white privilege. And it is dangerously naive to assume that that white privilege does not exist. Insiders and outsiders, white people and non-white people, have opposing views, and that the society has really been designed for one group and not the others. So let's go a little deeper. These four categories that I was presented with in class are used as a framework to figure out where you stand, what you think about critical race theory. The idea being that if we're thinking about race relations in America, there's really one of four types of person you can be, four types of views that you could have. The traditionalist, which is what I found myself being in class, like a typical Republican, Ted Cruz. I found myself reverting to this, or not reverting, but gravitating towards this view. This person believes that the civil rights movement was a complete triumph and that a colorblind society is appropriate. There are no need for reparations, affirmative action, or any government policy that sees race, any race conscious policies. This would be your typical Republican. Then you have reformists who says this person agrees with the traditionalists that the end goal is a colorblind society with no race conscious laws at all, but they don't think we're there yet. So they think we need to continue to tinker around the edges of our society with race conscious policies that are designed to elevate black people and other traditionally marginalized groups, by the way, until such a time that racial equity, social racial equity, is achieved. Then you have critical race theorists, who is essentially a reformist on steroids. Critical race theorists believe that contemporary American society, contemporary, right now, American society is actively harmful to black people culturally, economically, and spiritually. They believe that a colorblind society locks in all the injustices that black people suffer in America on a daily basis. They believe mainstream American culture is white culture and that it's not fair to force black people to participate. Now, since they feel this way, there's like the diagnostic aspect of it. Then there's the prescription. They want to see society radically transformed into something that is suitable for black people. The analogy here is that two roommates, one black and one white, sign a lease on an apartment together, except the white person moves in early and furnishes the apartment in such a way that's great for her, great for white people, perhaps, but totally inconsiderate of black people. The proponent of critical race theory says it's time to rearrange the furniture. To summarize, the person who believes in critical race theory believes five things. One, there is such a thing as white culture. Two, that white culture is the mainstream in America. Three, that this reality is harming black people. Four, pretending to live in a colorblind society ignores this reality. And five, that radical social change is necessary to correct the problem. There's a lot there, right? There's so much there. But I think the most important piece there is that there's this idea reinforcing a Nick Fuentes view of the world that there's such a thing as white culture, there's such a thing as black culture, there's such a thing as Jewish culture, Asian, Chinese culture, and so on. And I think many of us have been raised to not think that way. We don't like identity politics. We don't like it when Nick Fuentes does it. And I don't like it when I'm hearing it in the classroom. My reaction is, can't we all just be free and make our own choices and live with the consequences and have legal freedom, equity? Do we not have equity under the eyes of the law? Equal treatment under the eyes of the law now? We got a clause in the 14th Amendment that's pretty powerful regarding equal protection of the law. We got a Civil Rights Act. Are we really? Do we really still have a race problem in this country? No, implicit bias, of course it exists, but we've eradicated the racism from public institutions, haven't we? And isn't that enough? Critical race theorist does not think so. So the fourth category is a limited separatist. So Derek Bell, the creator of critical race theory, Harvard professor, on his deathbed, apparently lamented that CRT had failed. He reflected that it was not implemented because not enough white people agreed with it. That's why Mr. Bell created the concept of limited separation. Now, this is going to sound like a return to segregation, but it's not. The concept here is that black people are not treated fairly in mainstream white institutions. Therefore, black people need their own institutions. Think HBCUs, but for everything: government buildings, hospitals, fire stations, the whole nine, neighborhoods, whatever. The only rule here is that each institution must retain a majority black population. So non-blacks are welcome in these communities and institutions, but they're not allowed to outnumber the black people. Because again, the idea is that there is such a thing as a black view, a black character, a black ethic, and it needs to be represented, respected, and maintained and supported. The idea behind limited separation is that black people would be better off operating within their own institutions. It's troubling to learn that in law school, to hear that idea at all. But maybe there's something to it. Maybe Jews stick together and there's truth to that and they're stronger for it. Maybe black people need to do that a little more. Maybe white people should be allowed to do that. It's very, very fucked up. And this is why I'm searching for political identity. I learned all this stuff and I go, geez, man. And I think the Democrats support all this. So, wow, I guess I'm a Republican now. So critical race theorists ask the subordination question at every turn. That's what makes them criticalists. The subordination question: does the issue or arrangement before us negatively impact outsiders and maintain insider privilege? It's pretty hardcore stuff. So you can see how critical race theory, which I wanted to do an episode on, I've done it before, but I wanted to do a new one. But now with Nick Fuentes returning to X, you could see how I wanted to talk about both of these at the same time. Here I was just wanting to not check boxes about race, always being allergic to that, never wanting to see race. But I got an education in social justice that said, no, you got to see race, because by pretending you don't see race, you're just looking past the problems, that the unfair, unjust problems that black people are suffering in this country. It's not right. It's just not right. So that's a lot to chew on, isn't it? You could see why I'm struggling to process as a light-skinned reformed Jew, struggling to figure out my political identity when it comes to economic policy, critical race theory, trans issues. The list goes on. But now you have my relationship as a Jew to Israel. It's just a lot to digest. And so that's why I started the podcast, to connect with thought leaders, to get guidance. Please help me sort this out, and to for this to be a platform for myself to reflect on important issues and see if by November I can get some clarity on what I want to do. So thank you so much for joining me. I'll keep this episode rather short. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you next week. Peace out.